Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Two Blokes podcast. Today we have a very special guest, TikTok star Reclaiming Your Voice. Dead Duck and I are going to let her tell her story and discuss the state of things for men and boys, both on social media and in the world at large. Pull up a stump and join us. And Dead Duck, turning it over to
Hello.
you.
Thank you very much. It's been a while, hasn't it, since we did one of these and had a guest. Wow.
And not a
Here we go.
bloke.
I
Two
know,
blokes, two blokes and a bird.
Well, if you want to term it that way, we can go that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, Michelle, also known as Reclaiming Your Voice on TikTok. She and I have had many conversations about the subject of men and boys and men's issues and what have you, and advocates and everything else. But the reason I wanted to have Michelle come and join us is she's got quite the story, quite the history. And once you know and understand her history, you'd be asking yourself the question, well, why on earth doesn't this woman hate men? So, Michelle, first of all, if you'd like to obviously tell the world your story that's not on TikTok, and then, why it is you've decided advocacy for men is the right step for you.
Right. Well, so it will actually be 8 years, September 15th. I was a professor. I was actually getting ready to start a promotion. I was actually going to be the head of the graphic design department at my college that I worked at. I loved my job. Like, I absolutely adored my job. And I love my kids. I didn't have kids of my own, but I got to raise over, I think, 350 or 400, throughout the 15 years that I worked there. Um,
Oh,
and I was living a very normal life, and I was engaged. We were engaged for 2.5 years. Um, well, obviously not 2.5 years, like, but we were together for 2.5 and we were engaged. Um, and I was living kind of the American dream, I guess you could say. Like, we had just bought a house. We were refurbishing it. So we were living in an apartment at the time, but it was a very beautiful neighborhood. I was lucky enough that he had a good job. I had a good job. We took, you know, vacations, ate out once a almost once a week. We would be considered upper for middle class and doing very well for ourselves. And um so and he was my dream dude. Like, he was a big nerd. Uh, we loved books. We would go to the library, bookstores, things like that. Um, he was just my guy, and everybody loved him. Um, Family was super excited about it, and we were in the midst of planning our wedding. We were 6 months away from getting married, and um, it's weird. Like, I read a lot of memoirs about like disasters, and um they always say like it was such a normal day. Every book starts out that way when there's like a disaster. Everybody says it was so normal. And that's like the one common thread I've noticed, like, with reading books about people that have had their life changed. It was just like a normal day, and that's how they always start their story. Um so it was September 15th. Um, I don't really remember much about it because, like I said, it was, there was nothing to really know. I know I went to work. I know the only thing I found weird was he insisted on taking a picture of us that morning. And that was really unlike him. He wasn't a morning person. And he really wanted a picture of us together. And so I kind of looked annoyed in it. But he was giving me a kiss. And we went off to our separate jobs. And like I said, I don't remember really, probably just a typical day of teaching, you know. And then I came home, and I remember getting a call from him and saying he was going to go out and have drinks with the guys. And he was just going to grab one drink and then he would be home a little later. So I took a nap, and the next thing I remember was his hands on my ankles, and he was pulling me off the bed and dragging me from the bedroom into the kitchen. And I thought he was just like drunk. And I thought he was just like, goofing around, or like, just being weird. But then he put me up against the wall. He actually put his hand on my neck. He crushed my windpipe so I couldn't scream. And he looked at me in my eyes, and that's when I knew it wasn't a joke, because his eyes had turned black. And I always thought that was like some weird thing people say to make their story sound creepier, but it's a real thing. Like, his eyes were completely black. And all I remember he said was, only one of us is getting out of here tonight. And then, from what I know, by just the timeline is iffy, because like there's just flashes of things, so I don't remember what happened in order or anything like that. But he basically did to me what anything possible that a human being could do to another human being if you try to kill them. He suffocated me, tried to drown me in the dishwater, stomped, kicked, punched. He was wearing steel toe boots at the time. He was dragging me throughout the house. And I just remember thinking, all you have to do is outlast him. Don't hit him. It never even occurred to me to hit him with anything. I thought, like, there's no way I can beat this guy, because he was a foot taller than me and he had 100 pounds on me. So there was no way. And I'm not an athletic person. I have zero upper body strength. I've got like the arms of a baby bird. Like, there was no way I was going to beat that. So I just thought to myself, okay, just promise yourself, every time you fall, every time you hit the floor, get back up. Just keep getting back up. And it's one of those weird things where, like I said, I have flashes of things, but it was eerily quiet, and because he didn't really say anything, but it was just, and obviously I couldn't say anything because of my broken windpipe. So it was also an odd thing, because our neighbor, who we were friends with, she was a lone woman who had this humongous dog. Like, this dog would trample you. And she would come over a lot of times and have dinner with us. But it just happened that she wasn't there that night. She had told him that she was going to a conference in a city, and that would be the one night she was away from home. So that's why he picked that night. So no one would be able to hear. So I mean, again, he basically did everything to a person that could be probably done. I mean, he even lit me on fire on one point. That's why I wear the bow. Because this part of my hair doesn't grow back even because of it. And he had the phone, and I could see it sticking out of his pocket, and that was kind of my other thing, was just get the phone. And you know, so that went on for 3 hours. And the only reason I know that is because of um when we have the phone records from when he texted me that he was home, and then when I called for 911. So I got the phone. I don't know how I did it at that point. My arm was hanging off my socket. He had broken all of my fingers, stomped them one by one. And that was the only thing else I remember that he said. He said, you'll never draw again now. And I'm an artist. So that's why, that's why he said that. So he was trying very desperately to make sure, you know, that I wasn't. And I never thought I was that tough. If you would have told me, I would have thought, you know, one hit, I would have been knocked out. And so I got his phone. I managed to basically army crawl to the bathroom. We had a weird lock on our door, and we always made fun of it because it was so strange, because it actually locked on the bottom of the door and not in the middle. But that's actually what saved my life, because I could lock the door. And I remember calling 911. I couldn't get much out because obviously I was kind of just gurgling. So I just said help, but I don't even know how they heard what I was saying. I think they traced the call, and then I heard the dispatcher going, okay, help's on the way. 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes. Okay, you got 2 minutes. And I could hear him kind of rustling around, because the house was absolutely a disaster. I mean, everything was overturned. There were bloody handprints on the walls. Obviously there were like streaks. And he had like blood all over his clothes. And so the cops hear a knock, and all of a sudden I just hear him dead calm go, "Can I help you, officer?" And at that point I start fading in and out. And they come back. They see me basically as you know, what kind of looked like a human, I guess. And where I live, the police are not known for how shall we say, being very compassionate, especially when it comes to DV. And which I wouldn't learn until later, because I mean, I didn't know anything about DV. I didn't know anything about domestic violence. I thought, I was 35 at the time, and I thought I was like one of the lucky ones that, got got to live my life, and that, violence just never even crossed my mind. And the police officer, who I guess was in charge, looked at me and said, "What did you do to make him so angry?" And all I remember was, from that, I started going in and out, and things were going dark. I couldn't breathe. It felt like my chest was kind of imploding. And I remember the last thing I kind of remember is this female EMT going, "We need to get that." She like pushed this, like she was like a little thing, and she pushed the cop out of the way and said, I need to take care of her. And my heart did stop. It took 2 tries to bring me back, but I'm officially a vampire now. So I've been brought back from the dead. And all I remember is going by in the ambulance, and the last thing I saw was out of the corner of my one good eye, because he had completely broken the socket off of this eye. It was almost like almost hanging out of the socket. And what I saw out of my good eye is he was smoking a cigarette and laughing with the police officer. They hadn't even cuffed him. And so I was obviously in hospital. None of the procedures that were supposed to be done were implemented. In Pennsylvania, you're supposed to be able to have an advocate there with you. None was given. You're supposed to have a counselor. None was given. You're supposed to have all these things. And all I remember was coming in and out of, like, basically, it was basically a coma. But I would come out just and I would see very blurry stuff, and I would just go back out. And that was about 2 months. And when I started getting kind of my bearings, I just kept asking where he was, because I didn't remember. I thought I had gotten in a car accident, because that's the only thing that made sense to me. Because I had no idea why I was in the hospital. I had no idea why I couldn't move my legs. I had no idea why I couldn't see out of one eye. I had no idea. And I kept asking where he was, and my mom was like, just, you you could tell she didn't really want to tell me anything. And I said, I have to go back to work. I mean, that's how out of it was. I thought I was going like back to work. And so, but that's when I kind of, you know, that's timeline's a little fuzzy, because obviously I was very heavily medicated going in and out. I was also told that I wasn't going to be able to ever walk again, talk again. I was probably going to be blind in my one eye. I was probably never going to write my name again. So the prognosis was not good. But my mom, being Italian and the little firecracker that she is, and I've told Dead Duck about her, she's quite the inspiring creature. She was a former ER nurse, and she just she pushed me. And when I would do physical therapy, you know, the physical therapist, would like clap her hands when I wiggled my toes. And my mom was like, enough of this. And she threw the keys at the end of the thing you walk. And she's like, when you get to those keys, I'll clap. Like, that's my mom. Like, she just, and anybody else would be horrified by that story. But that's what made me eventually do it, because she pushed me. And so physically, I started healing. And then mentally, I started having like flashbacks. And I had no idea what a flashback was. I thought I was schizophrenic. I thought I was having hallucinations. And I was having night terrors. And no one was explaining to me what I was even having. No one even said, we think you have PTSD. No one even explained that to me. And what was explained to me was that because of a legal loophole in my state, that they could not charge him with attempted murder, because to do so, you need the testimony of the person that was attempted to be killed. Well, if they're in a coma, still counts. That clock starts at the moment of the call. And he had some very good connections in the town, or the city I live in. His family had money. And he pled down eventually an attempted murder charge to harassment with bodily harm, which is a $300 fine in PA, which is the equivalent of a traffic ticket. And that's when I got my first PFA, or protection from abuse. I don't know what you call it in the UK, but protection order, restraining order. And in my state's only good for 3 years. That's the maximum you can get. But again, no one was offering me counseling. All they were really offering me was drugs and meds and more drugs and more meds. And I learned very quickly that if I took enough, I forgot. And I could not face it. I couldn't. I couldn't face like what had just happened and why. I had learned that part of the plea deal was that he had vacated the house. I got to come home. And that's when my mom started learning that while I was in the coma, he had drained the bank accounts. He had drained my 401k. He had drained my savings. He had drained everything. He actually sold the house. He just took everything. Everything was gone. And I learned in that moment what 15 years worth of work just goes away. And, and, luckily though, I did have the apartment. Luckily I had my cat.
Yeah.
He didn't hurt her, which was a miracle. And but other than that, like that was pretty much, and then basically they did set me up with a women's shelter for counseling services, but basically it's where the counselor isn't just like an ex I don't know, patient's client, no certification in psychology, no certification in psych whatsoever.
Mm.
And basically they asked me if I wanted to sue him civilly for damages because obviously I lost my job. And with that, I lost my insurance, and my hospital bills alone were over $500,000. So, yay. Obviously, I did not have $500,000. Not to mention the doctor's visits, the meds, everything that was going to be able to keep me going and functional. So I said, is there an alternative? And they said, well, you can try suing the state. And I sued the state of Pennsylvania. And that's when my face got flashed across the newspapers for the first time. And I'm sure you've seen Harry Potter, right? Instead of the boy who lived, it was the woman who lived. It was quite a big story in my little city, and I was unwittingly thrust into the public eye. Because they had never had that before. No one had ever survived, I guess, an attempted murder quite like that. And I just couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle people knowing who I was. I was also very agoraphobic. Like I said, I was having, I almost said hot flash. It's still too little young for that, but I was having flashbacks, night terrors, anxiety. I just didn't want to be here. And I was angry. I didn't want to be here because I fought so hard to live. But what I didn't realize is I was fighting for a life that was never going to be again. The reason I fought so hard was because I thought I would be a teacher again. I thought I would have my life back. And I'm glad I didn't know what I know now because I don't think I would have fought, to be honest. That's the sad truth. But during this time, like I said, they weren't treating me, no counseling, no anything. And so the only way I knew how to fix myself was take some more meds. And basically, they would give me anything I asked for because their goal was just to keep me comfortable. I was doing speech therapy to actually learn how to speak because my whole teeth were broken. These are all fake, brand new. Got the implant. The eye socket is completely fake. Um, and but I had to learn to do everything over again. I had to learn how to speak, uh, read, write my name, and drugs were the only thing that fixed it. And usually a drug addict's very slight, very small escalation. I just went from 0 to 60. Like most people go from like a few pills and then, like a few more. I just went from like 3 to 50 because I was on a death wish. I wanted it to kill me. And every time it didn't, I just kept bumping it up, hoping it would. And that lasted about a year. Um, my mom didn't know. I hid it pretty well because I could, you know, put myself together for an hour, you know, sound articulate, and then basically my mom would leave, and then I would slump in a chair for the next, you know, 12 hours, and then at night I would go drug seeking. And it's pretty easy to get away with when you're, a 35-year-old woman because they're not expecting that you're up to no good. And I was completely up to no good. Um, and and then it was around the holidays in July, and I just decided I can't do this anymore. The night terrors were getting worse. I would be waking up with scratches and like, because you fight in the middle of the night and you don't remember how I got there. I remember my memory was completely messed up. Everything was like jarbled. Um, I couldn't remember. My mom was showing me pictures. I couldn't remember what they were of. I couldn't remember going there. I didn't remember ever going to Washington, D.C. I was quite the traveler before all this as well. So like I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't remember people's names. So I decided like I'm out. I'm done. I'm good, you know? And sorry, James. Um but it just happened to be a day that it happened to be July 4th, which everybody said, well, you picked one hell of a day, but I honestly, I didn't even know it was July 4th. That's how messed up I was. And my mom had to go somewhere and she wasn't going to be back because at that point she was checking on me in the morning. She was checking on me in the afternoon, at night. Um, and yeah, I took quite a lot of pills, and it just happened to be my mom forgot her purse at my house. She saw me in the middle of a seizure, which wasn't uncommon because that's another thing because of the head damage. He caused me to have seizure disorder. So she just thought I was having a normal seizure. And she took me to the hospital. And that's where they had to tell her that your daughter is a drug addict. And my mom was in quite a lot of denial. Um, and she's like, "Are you sure?" And they're like, "Yeah." And there was about 100 pills in my stomach because it had to be pumped. And I fought with this one woman. They brought in a woman to try to get me into rehab. And I fought with her. Like I was yelling, I was screaming, and because I just wanted to get the hell out of there because I wanted to go home and try it again. That was my plan. I just wanted to get home, try it again. Because when you fail, that's one of the worst things. Because you realize you can't even do that. You know, you can't even do that right. There's no out. And this woman stayed with me 5 hours past when she was supposed to go home. And she convinced me to go into rehab. Well, actually, it was a choice. It was either rehab or the mental institution. And I said, which one can you smoke at? And they said rehab. And I said, okay, I'll go there. So that was a pretty easy choice. I'm like, which one can I have my cigarettes at? And I went into 48-day program. I came out, and rehab was the best thing in the world for me. It reminded me I was human again. Detox, well, I had to go through medical detox as well. That's how addicted I was. They actually had to put me in a medically induced coma again and actually detox me that way because I was so addicted to it. If they had done it the normal way, my heart probably would have stopped. And but rehab saved my life. Like I said, it reminded me that I was human again. And it was a very like strict like rehab. Like you had to wake up at a certain time. Like every minute was accounted for. You were doing something every minute. And you had like chores and very weird things, and the food was atrocious. Just oh, like I joked that I called it rehab chicken because like just basically everything looked like chicken. Even if it was supposed to be fish, it looked like chicken. Even if it was like lasagna, it still looked like chicken. It was weird. It was like creepy. It was all in white sauce too. Um so um but they had a program where we did art therapy as part of rehab. And the guys, because it was a co-ed rehab, and most of these people had just come out of prison. This was part of their probation, was that they had to do rehab. So imagine me dressed like this, and I was exactly dressed like this because I didn't have I only had like my teacher's clothes. So I'm in rehab looking like this. They're in, sweats and a t-shirt. There were times people came up to me and thought I worked there, which was hilarious. And I started drawing again, and they said, "Oh my God, you're so good, you're so talented." And I hadn't heard that at that point year. And then I taught I was teaching these guys who just got out of prison, like how to draw a dog, like how to draw their kids' cards and stuff like that. And then when their kids would come visit them, I would help them draw a picture of their families and stuff like that. That's what brought me back. I was like a teacher in rehab, so it was fun. I came home and I just said I'm never going to go back, no matter what. There's something in recovery called one and done, and that basically means you go to rehab once, you have one recovery, you never relapse. And I said, that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a one and done. And actually, that was the best thing, again, that could have happened, because then they got me a psychiatrist, a therapist, a counselor, caseworker. That's when the help came. But it wasn't until I was a drug addict or a recovering drug addict that the help actually came. And I forget really how, because I would go to AA meetings a lot, even though it didn't really help me that much, but it was a way to interact with people. And we were forced to do it in rehab. So I just wanted to kind of keep up the same schedule for the first year to kind of get used to it. And I remember telling my story, and I remember everybody in the room going, and then I realized it wasn't really a normal story. And then I started to get asked to come talk at detoxes and halfway houses. And then they told me I should probably go back to school and actually be in a therapist. I went back to school for human behavioral studies, and I didn't want to be a therapist, though. I just, not for me. But I actually got a job in crisis. Now, before then, before I graduated, my abuser found me. I was actually at a park. I heard my name, and he assaulted me. Luckily, there was two wonderful men that pulled him off me. And they charged him again, and he pled down again. Still no jail time. Not even that night. He made bail that night. And then I moved again, and he found me one more time. And that was, he headbutted me straight in the face. He knocked on my door, headbutted me straight in the face, broke my nose, and that's where they finally said, "You're done. You're disabled, and you're never probably going to have a normal 9-to-5 job again." And so he hasn't stopped, unfortunately, but that's my life now. And so I made advocating my full-time job.
Obviously, that's a harrowing story, and I've heard the vast majority of it.
Yeah, I'm sorry
Obviously, a
if
lot.
you don't know how to
No,
make it.
no, it is what it is. At the end of the day, it's your story.
It's
It's your
hard if
story.
you leave anything out, like then it just doesn't make chronological sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, given all of that, okay, I know Taz has probably got a few questions for you as well. How do you go from obviously going all through all of that? You went through your stage of being a feminist, I'm assuming, because you've come into contact with um, feminist organisations around surrounding sort of domestic violence and everything else. How do you then end up where you are now, which is a staunch advocate for men and boys? Because, you know, for somebody who is an advocate for men and boys, I wouldn't blame you for being the complete opposite of that. And so that's something that's always impressed me. And what's the word I'm looking for, guys? I'm having a brain. I'm having a right old day of it
Perplexed.
here. um, yeah, it's something I've always wondered about.
So, I mean, my mom was a feminist, but I mean, she was also like a 60s lady. So everybody was a feminist and in the 70s, 60s, 70s. You know what I mean? Like, really, like you went to college or when you were like, it was a cool thing to do the marches and this stuff. Um, but my mom always called herself a feminist, but like, she was more for the equality of all people. We always volunteered and helped the homeless. I mean, she never was a man hater or anything like that. But And then, yeah, I hooked up with some, unfortunately, the one charity is very feministic. The other one that is a little further away, which is the one I go to now if I need anything, and they're the ones that actually take care of me. They're a little less rigid when it comes to their belief system. But I remember the first time I thought it was weird was I had this female therapist, and she was like, well, what's the goal? What do you want to do someday? And I said, well, I'd like to date again. Like, I was thinking about dating. And she was like, oh my God, no, not with your history. Like, that's just a horrible idea. That's absolutely horrible. Like, the men are just going to prey on you because once they find out that you're disabled and that you're a past victim, like they're just, I mean, she sounded like, I'd walk out of my house and there would just be this line of men waiting to abuse me. It was the weirdest thing I've ever heard in my life. But they basically dissuade you from anything man and everything, because I kept wanting to find out why. Like, why did he do this? Because we later found out it was premeditated. Uh, it would have been premeditated murder. He had been planning it for about a month, like as we can tell. And that's just from like receipts of like plastic tarps and things like that. Um, and But they just kept saying, well, that's what men do. That's what men do. And I'm like, it's not an answer. Like, what do you mean that's what men do? Like, I had been in a 10-year relationship before that. I had been in a 1-year relationship in college. Men had never done that. You know what I mean? So for them to just say that's what men do, you know, and the group meetings, it was just all about trashing men. That's all it was. Like, I was hoping for like to talk about like what helps flashbacks, what helps you when you don't want to get out of bed, like um and they would just sit there and talk about like the root of how men are just the problem, and that they would never trust a man again. And I was like, well, that's all well and fine, but that's not really like it's still, I was looking for this why answer. And um I got on TikTok with the pandemic, and I didn't even know what it was. Like, I had no idea. Like, my friend told me, like, you can watch funny cat videos. So that's what I really thought I was going to do on it. And my first channel, which is still exists, but I hope to God no one ever finds it, because it was just me dressing up in weird outfits, like old singers, and doing lip syncing. And that was my first TikTok channel. Um, and then I saw this woman who posted a story about her DV. And I said, well, I probably should post mine. And I posted my story. And then I waited the weekend, and then I woke up and that had 500,000 views in 2 days. And that's what I've learned what going viral meant. And I met very big feminists on the app who, I was on their podcasts, their lives, things like that. But it all revolved around making sure that I was mad at men every second, every minute, that they would send me videos that, were meant to make me just hate men. And they were like, oh my God, look at this misogynistic man. And oh my God, can you believe this man killed this woman here? And I mean, it was just, no one was talking about healing or solutions to any of the problems.
Right.
Like, believe that there are women problems that exist that we still have to deal in the West. I'm not completely saying that women are out of the clear, but they wouldn't talk about that. And I mean, they rallied everything back to how men were bad. And when I started really working with the therapist I have now, which is a man, because I fired every woman. And I said, I want a man caseworker. I want a male doctor. I want a male psychiatrist. I want a male therapist. I want a male everything. Because I think that's the other big thing where they go wrong, is they separate women out from men after DV for everything. Because once DV's on your chart, you'll never see a male doctor unless you ask for one again, because they assume that it's going to trigger you. And how are you supposed to ever integrate and trust a man again if you never see them? And so I was on, and I was starting to really question feminism and what it had become. And I started reading tons of books, bell hooks, Clementine Ford, Laura Bates, these horrible, horrible, horrible authors. I'm sorry. And I just didn't agree with any of it. It didn't make sense to me. Here they are trying to tell women to be empowered, yet the only way you're empowered is if you're a victim and you're talking about your victimhood 100% of the time. And the moment you don't want to be a victim, you're not powerful anymore. It's very weird. And so I saw this one guy's video and that they had sent me, but it didn't look right. There was something weird about it. Like it didn't flow right. And I said I contacted the guy and I said, "Can I see this original video?" And he's like, "Oh no, I know who you are." Because I got pretty big in the feminist space. So it's funny because some of the guys I'm friends with now I actually went after when I was a feminist. Um, and he's like, no, 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 I know who you are. Like, no, no, no. And I said, no, please, let me see the tape. So he sent me the tape. And lo and behold, he was actually the victim in this situation, but they had cut it to make him look like he was following these women and not the women were following him and harassing him and bothering him and threatening him. And so I put up that video, and the feminists just, I wasn't welcome anymore. And they went after my reputation. They were trying to find, they actually hired a private investigator on me. I mean, this is social media. This is like TikTok, you know? It wasn't Maddie. No, it wasn't Maddie. There's a guy named Declan. He's not on there anymore, but he's a friend of Maddie's. Um, and so, but they wanted to prove I was a fraud. I went from, you know, best known DV survivor on, in the feminist circle to she's a fraud. It was all a fake. It's, you know, they had all these weird conspiracy theories about like how I had paid the paper and just like all this like weird stuff and like it just odd. Um, and that really didn't work. I mean, it was annoying. But I was starting to go into men's lives and listen to their stories. And I realized that here was a group of men experiencing the same thing that I went through, or, you know, at least comparable, you know, and, but no one was speaking up for them. No one was, no one was listening. As a, I mean, my case is a little different because I wasn't very much listened to as a woman, which is why I think I can relate to men because I was kind of treated like a man in the DV situation, um, where, you know, I didn't get these perks that I hear that these women get. I know they get them, but I did not get them. Um, but I said, you know, if I'm going to be an advocate, I'm going to be an advocate for who needs my voice the most. And I'm pretty sure the women have it covered. And so that's when I started researching MRA content. And I would ask the guys questions, and, you know, they told me, watch the Red Pill movie. You know, I had my notebook in every live and writing down notes and, you know, um, and that's where I found my purpose. And I started a campaign in my city because we do a domestic walk every year, and I'm always the keynote speaker. And the first year, obviously, I, you know, talked about my normal things, but the second year, I started a campaign called Man Up, hashtag Man Up. And it was basically trying to get men to stand up if they had been victims of DV. I made the paper. I remember walking into the place where the walk was going to be, and I didn't know if it was going to totally flop. Like, I had been pushing this. I had gone to every small business. I had given flyers out. I had pushed everything. I went to the local police force. I went to the local fire, anywhere I could go. Like, I was like pushing this. And it all hinged on one day that everybody wore purple and they did a hashtag man up either on Facebook, Twitter, somewhere. And then they come to the walk. And I remember walking in and I didn't see a damn purple sign. And I was like, oh, fuck, I failed. I failed big time. And then they go, we had to move it over here because there's so many. And I just remember seeing men and women with man up signs and little kids with man up signs and the fire department with man up signs and our sports mascot in purple. And I was like, and that's when I learned the power of what you can do. And I did that all with a cell phone. I don't even have a computer.
Pretty good.
Not bad.
Yeah.
And it was the biggest, most attended walk that they had.
Oh, that's awesome.
You look
So
like you're in
since
shell. So you
so
look like
since
you're in shell shock there, Tazzy. Or Taz.
so since then,
Yeah.
continued to work at halfway houses, um, homeless shelters. I talked to I talked to both men and women, but mostly the guys. Um, and my health took a little uh, low dip.
Mhm.
Um, and so I had to kind of take a break from that. So I did like TikTok full time, but I did jump off the second tallest building in Pennsylvania to raise money for uh, male homelessness, which I was regretting, man. When you get up there, I was like, it sounded like a good idea at the
Yeah.
time, but
Yeah.
I,
Wow. But yeah,
that's the story.
while you were talking, I was kind of trying to organize my thoughts. Um, and it kept coming back to just this sort of, I guess, a common thread, for uh, people that, have been through it. And there's, you know, uh, there seems to be kind of like two baseline reactions. Is either A, just, become the monster that you wish to destroy, right? Just become as uh, just intractably and permanently pissed off,
Mm.
so that you're out of reach, and I believe there's a safety in that. The
Well, it's
the
easy to.
yeah, the women around you who were literally trying to sequester you from men, as in general, that I always felt like, that's where that comes from. Is they've sort of taken that road and it worked, you know and so that must be the solution, and the same thing, in I guess, to a lesser degree, was done with me when, I started looking around for answers, you know um and I heard a lot of the same kind of thing. You heard, this is what men do, and I heard, this is how women are. you know
Mm.
and eventually, if you don't take that road, you look at it, I just can't work with that. you know I can't make that work because, half of the people I interact with any given day are going to be them, and there isn't anything you, me, or anybody else can do about it. They are here, right? And if I approach my life and my interactions that way, I won't get anywhere, and I will still end up not wanting to be here. I will still end up suicidal. And so I'm like, forget that. Because just like what you were saying, that whole thing about suicide is nowhere near as easy as it looked on TV. You
No,
know,
no. I just
um,
thought take your like take a normal dose, double it, right?
mhm,
And then
mm-mm, mm-mm,
and of course my mom forgets her purse,
right. Yeah,
but
there's
she never
always something.
there's something like
um, but then, it's like, and I could kind of hear it in your explanation and everything. Underneath it all, I think for people like us, we end up reacting more in fear than anger, because we recognize that, if all I do is be angry about this, it'll never be over. It'll go on and on and on and on. And things will never get better, and the next one, that gets dragged out of bed and beaten isn't going to come out of it, and then they'll just be a statistic, and that'll be more reason for more hostility. And I'm like, enough of that, and from my side of it, uh, the kind of experiences were much more cumulative, took over time, and they were not physical, right? But they were psychological, and they were from back when I was 5 all the way up through, my mid 50s, really. And like, I would just rather, in the beginning, I was, I would just rather fold it all up and take care of myself and do, like heal up the best I can and leave it at that, you know. Watch cat videos, right?
Yeah,
Which, I
that's
mean,
the dream right there.
yeah,
But I have
to
to say,
this
what
day,
you
it's very seductive, right?
said, and
You know.
then that sparked something in my mind too.
Mhm.
I kind of thought too, like out of fear, that I was going to be as visible as possible because the more visible I was, actually, they said it was going to hurt my safety. The feminists, at the female shelter, they wanted me to like hide away.
Right.
And I said, no, I'm going to be as visible as possible. I want this person to see my face everywhere. So if I go missing or if I'm killed, they
Right.
know and I'm remembered. So I want him to see me everywhere. And
Right.
it wasn't like, oh, hey, look at me, because I don't really, what he thinks about me does not even enter my brain. But I wanted it to be really hard that people knew that if I don't talk to them for a day, that like something's wrong.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, even that, I was like remaining visible,
Yeah.
and making sure that, if you go missing, you are missed, right? It's still down to uh, having, having that condition with the right group of people, right? People who will uh, act on your behalf if you go missing, or not missing, but something goes wrong. And it's the same, on this side of it, because to be honest with you, uh, because I'm a man, right? I'm there isn't a knee-jerk reaction to, is Taz okay, right?
Mhm.
So, I've kind of cultivated a group of people in my life, who can do that, right? And they have a reason to, you know, they want to know that I'm, you know, okay. And like I said, when you take that route, and Dead Duck, this might be educational for you. Just only that you start to see that, you know, you can't trust and have confidence in just everybody, but at the same time, you can't afford to just trust nobody. And I, this was something that I kind of butted heads with. Uh, I don't know, like more radicalized MGTOW and red pill guys. Where they cannot be made to believe that uh, somebody like me, can put so much of my life in the hands of, I mean, not only women in general, which I do, but some of them are, you know, I mean, they're feminists. They are, right? And I'm like, it's only the ones, that that I can reason with, and that I can be heard by, And I tell people all the time, that's not a very large group of people. It's just a few, but they exist, right? And, you know, because of how things are, my ongoing well-being kind of depends on that, and I've accepted that. It's like that's the way it is, the hand I'm dealt, and so that's the way it's going to be. And I'm listening to your story, I could kind of peek around the corner as you were going through it. So I bet she kind of found the same spot, where it's not about trusting everybody, and it's not about just blindly believing, for example, in the court system, because they failed you
Wow.
outright,
And
same,
continue to do so.
yeah, same
I mean,
here. I have been told by, people who work in the court system, if you're looking for justice, don't come here because we don't have
yeah.
that, you know, we have this, right? And so, can't do that. So just kind of let that go. And the health and human services monolith it's like a casino. I mean, sometimes, you walk in there and, you come out with more chips than you came in with, but most of the time you just come out, with your pockets empty, right?
The
And
house always wins.
yeah, and I'm like, I don't, I tried, I started trying to get better a long time ago, back in 1990, and all of the focus was on my drinking, on my alcoholism, and there wasn't much discussion about, my suicidality or the trauma or none of that, because they didn't, it's like you know, they were ignorant. It's like, we don't know what to do. We're going to help you not drink, you know, and it worked for a while, right? But I and my insurance providers spent breathtaking amounts of money, like shocking, when I finally saw the bills. And at the same time, I was not a reluctant participant. I put myself into it, right? And I just kept failing, And the thing about, the addiction recovery sort of, standard line is, if it doesn't work for you, it's essentially your fault, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, well,
You don't have the willpower. You didn't want it
right.
that, and you
Yeah,
didn't.
any number of things, you didn't put enough faith in your higher power, whatever the case,
Oh God, that.
and
Oh, oh,
as
I know.
long as they were able to keep me in the frame of mind that whatever failures I experienced were of my own doing, then, it's like there was no incentive for me to, open my eyes and look around and see if I was alone, Now it turns out, of course, I am certainly not alone. There are many, many, many like, right? And, there are many, many, many like you. And, you start, then you go through sort of, or I went through sort of a really, bitterly resentful phase of saying, well, that's just a racket, right? It's just a hustle. And as long as they get paid, if I live or die, I don't care, you know? Um, and uh, to one degree or another, that's probably true, you know? But at the end of the day, every time I hear a story like yours that originates from, the very, very violent and I don't know how you'd put it, you know, malicious insanity of another person, I'm kind of like you. It's like, I want to know why, you know, how did that person get that bad off? You know, my
Right.
primary perpetrator, I never found out very much about, uh, as a relative, you know, but much, much older. I mean, was born in the uh, early 1900s. The point being, you know, I did not find out what the hell happened with him, and I know I never will, you know. But I
What
know it was something, you know.
you know, what's interesting to me, I actually found my answer when I was doing we would go in, well, you could volunteer and actually talk to people that have been incarcerated.
Mhm.
And I went and interviewed a man who stabbed his wife to death. And I said, why? I mean, it was weird because none of the men wanted to go, but like I went in and I felt like, um, Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs, like that,
Yeah,
scene where she's just walking, and I was like, um, I half expected like, "Hello, Clarice," like I was waiting for it, but I said, "Why did you do it?" And he goes, "Because I could." And then I realized that's the answer
yeah,
there, and and we want there to be some deep seated reason, but at the end of the day, there's no sense to a senseless act of violence. So that actually gave me more peace than probably anything a therapist had ever said. It was just because he wanted to,
yeah.
you know? And people ask me, how can that bring you peace? That would piss me off. And I'm like, because it doesn't mean it had anything to do with me.
Right.
Thought it
And
was me,
that,
you
yeah,
know.
I mean, me being 5 years old when, what happened to me happened, I still, had this unconscious undercurrent that, it was my fault. Right? And at the end of the day, on my own, I had to just come to peace with the fact that it wasn't, you know. And there's even at least going through it that way, there's kind of a loss of a sense of lost control, that if it really wasn't my fault and there was absolutely nothing I could have done about it, that means that uh, you know, it could happen again, not to me, but somebody else. And it's like, yeah, it can and it does, you know. But after that, you know, after that fear kind of goes away or, settles down a little bit and you start looking for answers, you start looking for the why of it, just because you could do it, why would you want to? Then you get really I don't know, like you feel lost, you know.
Oh yeah,
Um,
because then what do you do? Because your
right.
life's never going to be the same. You're not
Right.
the same person. That's the other thing people have to understand. Your trauma completely rewires your brain.
Yep.
So you have a different
Yep.
personality. You're
Yep.
coming out as a different person. So it's not only you need to figure out what the hell happened, you have to figure out who the hell is running this new body of yours and how your mind works.
Yep.
And nobody and people around you just want the old person to come back. Well,
Right.
it might be different, obviously, if it happened at 5. So like there wasn't, but my situation was everybody kept saying, when are you going to be the
Normal.
normal? Yeah,
Yeah.
when are you going to be normal again? And I was like, so that was my goal. I kept trying to, and then I would pretend.
Yeah.
And then when I couldn't pretend anymore, a lot of people left. A lot of people left.
Yep.
And
Yeah. I was,
lose
spared, I
much
guess.
more
What's that?
in trauma. You lose so much more in trauma than people think. They think, oh, well, you just lost this. No, you lose people, you lose, you lose almost everything you can
Everything that
lose.
matters. Yep. And like I say, I
Well,
was,
not everything.
yeah. I mean, or at least you find out the things that you can really make use of. You know.
Mhm.
Uh, Dead Duck, are you good? We can take a quick break if you want.
I think we'll just sort of have a bit of a conversation between ourselves, and we'll see, when
Okay.
Michelle comes back.
Okay.
Because this has got me thinking. Have you ever read the book Terrorist Attack Girl
No,
by Mailey
not
Chapin?
familiar. Not
Right.
familiar. What is that?
Um, she was caught in the attack in Nairobi in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
She was in one of the hotel rooms when the five gunmen entered the complex,
Right.
and she was saved like 18 hours later or something. Um, and the book is basically what was going on for her during the attack,
Mm-hmm.
and then the following, I think, year or so afterwards, when dealing with her PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a book I'm going to start recommending to people because A, it's bloody good, and B, she's working for Google at the time. That's how she ended up being in Nairobi.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but she's now left Google
Mm-hmm.
because typical American company thoroughly let her down
Right.
in her hour of need. And she's done an app for people with PTSD to help people with PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those. I mean, the other thing for her was meeting the guy that was known as Obi-Wan Nairobi. I don't know if you know his
Mm-hmm.
story.
I know of him, but not his story. Yeah.
Yeah, former, he's now a retired British SAS operator who was basically, he went in and dealt with the situation for 20, I think he said he was there for 22 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So even after they got everybody out, he was still on scene. And he's done several podcasts, several strange things that have sort of happened to him before, during, and after.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, she got to meet him 1 year post event.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's a good little book if you're dealing with PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
and you're, because a lot of the stuff you guys are talking about, losing sense of self, and struggling with identity and everything else, is something that she talks about openly in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And she literally calls, it her life BTA, before terrorist attack,
Mm-hmm.
life after terrorist attack, and for her the two lives are very, very separate.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've heard me talk before about,
Mm,
this is less 2.0, right?
mm,
But I mean, the reality is that, um, I think a lot of it starts in like Michelle was saying, the rewiring of you, just stuff changes up there, and
mm,
it's like it doesn't change back, and trying to fight that is kind of pointless.
yeah.
But at the same time, it's hard to accept. It's like, you know what, I am different now, and I'm going to be different, and that's the way it is, and I have to learn, how to function this way, right? And
Mm,
you know what, my Dead Duck, while you were talking, you know, and you have, I don't know if you've noticed, but you've done this before, where the equivalent to this kind of uh, trauma and dehumanization and really abandonment, that uh, Michelle and I, you know, talk about. It's like you have to go out to global terrorism to find the equivalent, and I'm like, that's probably bad, but
No, but
you know,
it's actually, they have found the same tactics they use to
yeah,
get
yeah,
prisoners. Those are the tactics of abusers. They
yeah,
make you rely on you. Like
hmm
that's why it's it's very similar.
yeah,
But it's like they're born with that. It's like a handbook that they all read from, yet where the hell did they get it? Like
yeah,
that's always been my question. Like, how the hell do you know how to do all of this? And but
yeah.
then,
And why are they always the ones driving the bus?
oh,
You
well,
Yeah.
know, you know,
Mm.
yeah,
uh,
well, I always say, like, eh, people always forget, because they say, oh, well, you have your abuser, but then you have the abuse of the law enforcement. Then you have the abuse of the court. Then
yep,
you have the medical gaslighting, usually, or
yeah,
psychological gaslighting. So you're going to be abused by all systems on all fronts.
yep. And like I say,
Yeah.
they make it the feeling of approaching any of those institutions. I feel like I would have the same feeling walking into a casino. I might come out of this, at least breaking even, but I doubt it, you know,
Yeah.
right? And uh, this is where, when I have conversations outside of, the uh, the men's issues conglomerate, with, these other groups of people, whenever I talk about that, whenever I talk about the uh, lack of consistency and lack of transparency, and lack of effectiveness of these institutions, everybody's right on board. They screwed me too. You know,
Mm.
and I'm like, well, I, I'm glad that you agree with me. I mean, even if it's kind of a contentious discussion, I'm like, I'm glad you agree with me. But now we do what? Because we
That's what it
can't.
always comes down to, isn't it?
Yeah, I
Now
mean,
what do we do?
right. We've already demonstrated these people and institutions do not now, nor have they ever had our interests at heart. So they
Mm.
can't be relied on. There are one or two of them maybe, fumbling around in there trying to do the right thing, which is nice, and sometimes that works out good. But I can't live that way. It's like I've talked with Dead Duck before. I have a real kind of love-hate relationship with luck. I don't believe in luck because people have told me that I am lucky, right?
Oh,
Now here,
I
yeah,
hate
at
that.
closer to the end of my life than the beginning, and finally I'm lucky, you know. And like for one thing, it's way too late, right? For another thing, um, it was very uh, you know, uh, before that it was always just this tease where you might get lucky, but I never did, and uh, I was just like, luck runs out. It fails to show up. It's it's fickle. It chooses the worst possible moment to abandon. Leave me away from luck. I don't want nothing to do with it. You know, and as best I can, I try to convince people you know, uh, don't feel that good about good luck, right? Because there's always another shoe to drop, and
Mm.
it's better, to act collaboratively with other people, who've had bad luck, right? However you want to call it, and try to make our own, you know, and try to make something that's a little more dependable, and like your situation, everybody from the cops that showed up all the way out to, the social services people that you ended up with, they did what they did for their own reason, and that it may or may not have had anything too much to do with you, right? And it was the same for me. They were doing what they were doing, for their own interests, not for me. And I'm like, I can't work with that. I need to find people who are as interested in uh, my well-being as I am. And it's like, who's that going to be? But
Yeah.
I've also found that, when I show an interest in their well-being, then they will show an interest in mine. But for example, the court system that I went through, and the law enforcement, et cetera, et cetera, what could I do for them? You know, I mean,
Not an awful lot.
no, they were already all set,
Mm.
right? And so there's nothing I could do for them, so my well-being and my, fortunes in the future were of no interest to them, right? They were going to do what they were going to do because that's what they were going to do, right? And it's like, so, I tend not to uh, rely on them very much. That's sort of a contention that I have with some men's groups, is they just, they treat law enforcement and the judiciary, at least in the United States, like a misguided friend that needs to be, carefully guided back along the right path. And I'm like, no, they're not. They know exactly what they're doing and why, and they have every incentive to make sure that they never go back onto the right path,
Mm.
because their bread is buttered on the other side. That's how they make their fortunes, and how they acquire power and money and influence and all of that, by flatly ignoring men like us.
Mm.
Okay? Now and from now on, right? And they have unlimited resources to make sure that continues. And the I guess sort of backdoor outcome from that is the kind of thing that happened to you, Michelle. Is that when it comes to dealing with somebody like you, they still have to look after their own interests first, and exclusively, right? And at the expense of your interests, even your life, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, when I had to I've given, now two victim impact statements, and my last one was, what is it going to take? Is it going to take my dead body?
Mm.
And because I just was done. Like, I was nice the first time, I made a very nice, impact statement. The second time, I was just like, well, fuck it. What is he going to do? Hold me in contempt?
Right.
Um, um, and I just said, what is it going to take?
Right. Right.
Like, what, what, like, what? I mean, and, you know, and everybody was so surprised, like the third time when we did better the third time. I mean, he got probation. Ooh. Um, but and people were like, "You're not angry." I was like, I would have been more surprised if they had actually put him in jail.
Mhm.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
honestly, I would have been more surprised if they had put him in jail.
Right.
Like, I have no faith that they're ever going to do the right thing until they're forced to.
Yeah.
And I worry that the forced to is if when I'm not breathing,
Yeah. I
and
mean,
I'm just
that's even
stubborn to give them that.
that's exactly that. I mean, you nailed it right there. And this is something that Ed Duck and I have talked about before. That um, you know, all of those issues, right? The lack of effectiveness and consistency, and you know, I don't know, honesty from those institutions, right? That all of those things are going to outlive me for sure. I will be a distant memory, and they will still be like that. You know, probably, all of us. But in the meantime, I'm still here. You're still here, right? Mike, in your own travels, you're still here too, because
Mm.
you're not unscathed either, right?
No, but
And
my story isn't quite as harrowing. Yes,
no,
I've had I've had to
no,
deal
it
with.
isn't, and neither is mine, but once you get down past a certain point, you realize it doesn't matter. This is not the
Yeah,
misery Olympics,
no,
right? And uh, the ability to build and maintain, you know, uh, an additional structure of support and power that does not involve law enforcement or the judiciary or the health and human services systems, but relies on each other. It at least gets us from one end of the day to the other.
yeah,
And the more of us there are, the easier it is to do that. You heard me complain earlier that you know among the people that are at least uh, not antagonistic toward those institutions, there are not very many people that I can talk to honestly about
mm,
my situation, not because I don't like them, but because when I do, they look at me like I have three heads. You
mm,
know, they think I'm crazy, right? But there are some few who are like, yeah, that makes sense. That follows, right? And those people, as long as I show them, an interest in their struggles, we don't talk that much about, what goes on in court or what goes on, in uh, like social services or anything. We talk about, helping each other out. But when it comes to, as you, Dead Duck, as I have been asked more than once, just like you, Michelle, to talk about my stuff to, you know, like people, professionals, right? And tell my story and all of that. And, you know, I don't really, uh, I don't make a very emotional plea. I mean, I explain the fact and I just kind of put them out there. But then I try to say, look, this is my story, and everything that happened to me is not undoable, right? It's part of my past, and there's nothing anyone can do to undo it. But can we talk about what to do and how to proceed to make sure it happens less often, sometime
Well,
before my last rites.
well,
yeah,
this is why I've talked to Mike about why, like, I think women in the MRA movement are so important because I think we can do those emotional pleas, like,
Yeah,
I mean, um, I think that it kind of opens up the door a little bit because I can kind of go places where they just kind of shut the door on men, you know what I mean? Like I can
yeah,
not bat my pretty eyelashes, but sometimes that helps. Um, but like I'm less likely to be called, a misogynist if I want to do a man's walk.
right,
I'm less likely to be told no, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Um, and so, and I think that's a huge thing that we're, I mean, we have to get the women to care if we're going to also move this along because the problem is I mean, I'm in the minority. Well, I wouldn't say the minority, but probably the smaller minority where a woman didn't get justice or any help. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's why I can't relate to like when these red pill dudes are like, "Oh my God, you must have got all these free things," and I was like, "Free things? What free things? What free? What
Yeah.
did I get free?"
Yeah.
Um, I got I got a shitload of trauma and a lot of therapy bills. I don't
Yep.
see no free thing.
No.
Um, but you know, but I think it's hard to get women to come to the MRA side because they might have gotten justice. They you know, they haven't experienced that not getting justice, so they cannot relate. Um, or they did get help, or people did care around them. Um, but I think I definitely think we do need the women to care. I think, you know, I mean, you know, feminists come up with a slogan and 2 days later you have a damn march. It's like, where the hell, how the hell did they organize that in 2 days? Um, and, you know, that's kind of what we need, you know?
It is, and uh, in fairness, right, and in defense of, I guess, uh, those failures on their part. Um, everybody at the end of the day needs a reason to do whatever it is they're going to do, right?
Mm.
And the ones that I have spoken to who have a reason to care about, and it's like I say they care about me, like in particular, you know, not men in general, just me, right? But the reason they do is there's enough common uh, struggle and past misery, right, that I can be honest about, right, with them, so that they see, I'm not an enemy, right, um, and that I, I'm not whole, but I am reasonable, you know. And because of that, every now and again, once in a while, somebody will show up that, can relate to me and that I can relate to. But I'm like, what you're talking about is, uh, you know, incentivizing large groups of people, in this case, feminists, and at the end of the day, they're very vulnerable to people who are doing what they're doing for their own personal gain, and it isn't listening to us and supporting us isn't something that they have to warn them against. All they have to do is not talk about it,
Mm.
right? All they have to do is not really examine our situation, and everything else that's left over is the men, like the man that assaulted you, right? That's all they can see, right?
Mm.
And on our side of it, now that so many men are starting to wake up, it's kind of the same problem in reverse, right?
Oh yeah.
There are people, whose agenda, is more focused on what they personally can get out of it rather than what's going to do the most good for the most men and boys. And all they have to do is not talk about, you know, the uh, the fact that your story exists and
Mm.
many others like it, and that the bar to entry into our movement for somebody like you is high enough, right? That there aren't very many that come through, and the ones that do, I can, Dead Duck, I think you can think of a few names that I'm thinking of right now. Some of them, they come in to our movement like a bull in a china shop. Okay, they're out of control, and they're just so overcome with their bitterness and resentment toward feminism in particular and women in general, that they kind of lose the plot, right? They forget why us guys are here. A lot of the men that I know that are at least part of the movement, they just want things to get a little better for everybody, right?
Hmm.
And they understand that, as humans, men and women, to be binary about it, men and women are bound together, now and from now on, right? And when we're in a situation like this, it's like we're bound together at the neck. I mean, in other words, it's not an easy and cordial, and intimate connection. Like I say, it's more like two cats in a bag. You know,
Mm.
they can't get out, but they can't stand each other, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, that's that's not sustainable. Men in the movement and men who are, uh, victims of all these systems don't very often they don't realize that they cannot afford, right, to make the same mistakes that uh, earlier versions of the feminist movement made. They made a lot of mistakes, and they're still cleaning up that mess. And maybe they're going to be cleaning up that mess for a long time, right? But we don't have to screw up the same way, right? And because we're men and we're not women, we're not going to be given quarter and uh, coverage to make those mistakes without consequences, right? That, like I said, when it comes to not understanding why feminists would, keep you so sequestered and brainwashed about men, because they've always been allowed to, you know, we would never get away with that, right?
No.
Not even for a minute. So
Yeah.
we have to proceed differently, you know.
Mm.
And like Michelle, you're an example of that emotional and I guess spiritual uh, element in our movement that we it's like we have to promote that. I said a long time ago at an NCFM meeting, I said, if we work this properly, the kind of women that we really need in this movement should get all of our attention and all of our support. And I said that should be done at the expense of those who cannot do that. And it's like that's a hard reality because that means ignoring, and disregarding a lot of women. And I'm like, what can you do? For at least a little while, that's the way things are. And uh, if we can't do that, why should anyone listen to us? You know, at the end of the day, I tell guys all the time, at the end of the day, never forget, all we are is men, and when we go, on a frontal attack against, like the Supreme Court or, uh, uh, the family services, social services, and the legislature, et cetera, that's how they see us. All you are disposable. You know, you are totally interchangeable and anonymous if you're an ordinary man, right? And if we don't approach it that way, then like I said, why should anyone listen? Think, for those people, everything is going along just fine. They don't
Mm.
have to change. And for the women that come into our movement, And like I say, they're, kind of extreme, and I think you all know who I'm talking about. They're kind of extreme. I get why, it's not unreasonable. It's just that it's ineffective and it's not sustainable. It's not something we can make long-term use of.
Yeah,
Right? And that's unfortunate because they're very passionate and they really mean what they say. Some of them, some are just kind of on a hustle, but some of them really mean what they say. But, when I try to talk to them, I'll point to somebody like you and do what this person does. You know, if you want to help, do what Michelle is doing, right? Because if you don't do that, you're going to burn out and then you're just going to you know, give up, right? This is how to do this for the long haul. And you have to do it with the understanding that you, whoever it is, not going to solve everything that needs solving before the end of your life, right? But if you don't do something, then things will not only not change, they will get worse. And that's inevitable. I mean, that's just, it's unstoppable if enough women, in particular, and people in general don't start seeing uh, this perception of us as disposable and, anonymous, and start doing something about it. Why should the people driving the bus change direction? They have to have a reason to. So that's my take on it anyway.
yeah. Well, Michelle and I have been talking quite a bit recently, haven't we, Michelle, about trying to get men to understand, not just women, but trying to get men to understand that their value is far greater and goes far beyond what they can do for society, what they, the amount of money they earn, willingness to put their lives in danger and everything else. Um, so I think that's important. And I think Taz has gotten to Michelle a little bit when he said, do what Michelle does and you'll be all right. I mean, obviously, Michelle, you and I have seen it on the TikTok that there are a large number of women who come into this, jump up and down, make a load of noise, and then they can't do it for the long haul because they start to see and start to understand that this is not easy. This is grunt work. This is, you know, graft. You want to be
Well,
involved with this, you're gonna work. This isn't.
yeah. Also, I mean, I think they like the flash, I mean, it's theater for them. I mean, I do a little bit of I've been trying to change up my videos, and actually they've been doing really well lately. The new way I've kind of done them, because I kind of put my little fun spin in it instead of just going and not moving my head and being like, and this guy is this, and this guy, I actually move now. Um, um, but I mean, I think it's the acceptance of men and men realizing that, I mean, because some of the reasons women leave is because of men.
Mm,
Let's be honest. Um, they say we don't want you here. You shouldn't be here, and we don't want you here.
yeah.
And if you tell it to the person on the wrong day, like you know, it can you could possibly lose somebody very good.
Mm,
Um, but I just don't think these women understand what it means. Like they think uh, they can put up a backdrop that says men matter, and um, you know, but like, what's your plan here? Like,
mm,
like what Okay,
What?
so you got 70 people in a live, but you're not talking to them. You're not
Yeah,
I mean, like on that live this morning, I saw you popped in real quick.
yeah.
I got absolutely annihilated. Annihilated. All those people went against me.
Hmm.
Um, to the point where I was just like, I'm done.
Yeah,
Because it was, oh well, women have it worse, women have it worse. And you gotta understand that women, we've
yeah.
we're only been 50 years out of oppression. And it's like, dude, you weren't in oppression. You were never in oppression. You're not feeling any of these effects of oppression. What are you talking about? Um, and you know, and they just kept referring to, well, men are the problem, men and men, it's other men, and it's men who make men feel bad. And it's like, have you ever talked to men? Like, I swear to God, these people
Oh,
have just,
no, they never. The short answer is no, they haven't.
yeah,
And they probably won't. There's told Dead Duck before. There's a collective of people like that. I say they are out of reach. They're not. Uh, they cannot be persuaded, and kind of have to live with that. But there are many who are, uh, able to be. They're able to see reason. Like you mentioned, the collective oppression of women.
mm,
The powers that be will do everything they possibly can, to warp that idea into, men are just like unreasoning savage ogres, and women are forever, uh, angelic victims, because it suits their purpose. And then somebody like yourself comes along and not only explains that isn't really, that's not reality, but also, here are the results of that, warped belief, right? Here are the results for men, and just as importantly, here are the results for women. You know,
oh
um,
yeah. I mean, I try to, do the path of, what helps men helps women, because I mean, I don't like doing it that way, but like, it kind of works. Um, I explained, listen, if you want to have rapists off the street, then you've got to stop falsely accusing men of rape. Those two
mhm,
are together. You
Hmm.
can't
yeah,
have one without the other.
yeah,
Um, and they go, oh no, there's a small minority, and a small minority, and it doesn't
yeah,
really. And I said, listen, I have also, there's a part of my story that I did leave out just because I'm still processing them. But I will say I am a rape survivor as well. And um the judge actually said the only reason we are offering this individual of a plea deal, and I mind you, I had a rape kit. I'm using TikTok language, Mike. Uh-oh. Um,
Yeah.
you can
God,
speak reality here.
yeah, sorry.
All right.
I had a positive rape kit, positive toxicology for robohypnol. I had the pictures, and the judge actually said the reason we are offering this individual a plea deal is because the influx of false allegations. Because so many states are getting sued now, like they're
Yeah,
getting the pants off of them.
yeah,
Now, mind you, it's men that have been released after 55 years, so it doesn't really like what amount of money is gonna, help them out. Um,
right.
but if we do not start punishing the women that do this, I mean, the perpetrators are just gonna be. That's who's gonna be walking the street, not the good men.
Right.
Mm.
And So you tell them that it's intertwined. You fix one, you fix the other, or at least you help the other. Um,
Yeah, yeah, that's it. I mean, and we're talking about like the end point of that kind of injustice. In other words, this is like the final outcome is innocent people, get thrown under the jail and guilty people walk, right?
Mm.
And whenever I talk to like one of the people in my life actually is a therapist who also works with the prosecutor's office in another county as an expert witness in basically describing and confirming the effects of sexual trauma, especially on minors, but anybody. And we've had that person and I have had a number of conversations about how vulnerable that is to being misused, and how vulnerable her work is to being uh, exploited, by prosecutors, for example, who are only interested in, you know, throwing a guy in a cage because a finger got pointed. So, that person walks a very delicate line, right? And, the court system makes sure that it stays very delicate, and that her work can be misused to, put an innocent person in jail, right? And correspondingly to, end up having a guilty person go free.
Yep.
And I'm like, the it started with a conversation that she and I had about the court system in general, and sexual assault cases in particular, and she said, just this tiny small percentage uh, of sexual assault cases actually result in a conviction and a standard sentence, right? Not a plea down or whatever have you, but where an actual guilty person goes to jail, right? And I'm like, so understand this: that system that so reliably fails to prosecute and convict the guilty, why am I expected to believe that they are so much more successful at not prosecuting the innocent and
Mm-hmm.
not convicting? In other words, if they're that incompetent in, pursuing a guilty verdict with someone who's guilty, what's in front of me that'll help me believe that they've got a spotless track record when it comes to incarcerating and destroying the life of somebody that never did anything wrong? You know what I mean? It's
Yep.
like you're asking me to put 50% faith in a system that, as far as I can tell, doesn't. Whenever they do something right, it's an accident. And and I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't believe that they do uh, even a reasonably good job at prosecuting and convicting the guilty, and neither do I believe that they do, any good job at not incarcerating the innocent. In my state, in Illinois, the movement called the Innocence Project was
Yeah.
launched, like 10, 15, and they came across stuff, and it wasn't, obviously, it was all, criminal cases, but, they came across stuff where people, as you say, ended up doing 50 years for a crime they never committed, but it was how they got there, and it wasn't so much what they did look at as what they just refused to look at,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, what do you expect?
Yeah.
If you guys act like the court system. You guys operate like the Klan. Somebody points a finger, and if they point the finger at the wrong person, that person's not going to last very long.
Yeah.
It's a Salem witch trial. It's the Salem witch trials. But then
Exactly.
you walk in with buckets of evidence, and they're like, I mean, you go over here. It's
Yeah.
like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
And I mean, I knew I was never going. Like I said, I would have been more surprised if I actually won in freaking court. That would have actually probably, stunned me to death. Um, um, and but the thing is, I mean, where I'm trying to focus on is education, awareness, and compassion. I think, like Mike knows, those have always been like my three kind of markers. Like, first we have to educate the people about, or first we have to, get the people aware of these issues. Then we have to educate them about them. And then we have to get them to care about them. And people will, protest or, march if they care. And what I learned from doing it in my city is all you need to get people to care is one person that makes them care for whatever reason it is. And I'm very loud. I'm very annoying. I'm very persistent. And I got to the point where people just didn't want to see my face anymore, so they gave me what I wanted.
Got to see that with Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
Well,
in
fairness to the people who, still even look askance at someone like yourself, right? I've tried at length to sit down with some of them occasionally, just to not approach it that way and to only get them to see reason, um, to see in what ways they themselves would benefit, by not being so antagonistic, and I'll be honest with you, most of the time when it comes to them, and this is kind of sad in a way, but if I appeal to their emotion, it never seems to work, but uh, if I appeal to their sense of their own issues and their own motivations and say, tell them, look, here is how being less antagonistic toward us will help you, and I can back that up. Like I can show you results of people who have done that and they are happier, and they have made progress, right? But sometimes they'll kind of like revert back to, well, what about the like the effect on women who come into our movement because they want to be, they only want traditional society and traditional relationships, and I know some of the people that want that, I do. And I say those people at the, down underneath it all, right? They've got just a really, they've got a very tender heart, and they want everything to be okay, at any cost, and if it means for them to be, barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, they're right on board with it. But the good news is, there aren't very many of those, right? And, they're guys like Dead Duck and I, we're we are not convinced at all, that trying to go back to Ozzy and Harriet is ever going to work again, right? And we're pleased with that, and we're looking after our own interests because going back to being Ozzy is horse crap, for one thing, and for another thing, we already have, women and girls in our life, that don't want to do that, right? It's like they don't want to be that way. There's a real good friend of mine that I've been in contact with for a long time, and she's not part really of she's she claims to be a feminist, but she's not a very happy one. But she's certainly not an MRA, and she's very career oriented, and she's very driven, et cetera, and so forth. And I care about her. I want her to be able to flourish, right? Unencumbered by, all of the rest of this. But I realize, and she has started to realize that all of these things exist. They are part and parcel of the water that we all swim in. And only being unhappy about it, is not enough, right? Things have to be done, right? And people have to be I don't know, what would you say, Dead Duck? They have to be enlightened or something.
Yeah. I said
that's
many years
painful,
ago,
man.
I said many years ago when I was just doing this on like Twitter and doing the odd conference and things like that, and this whole woke terminology was just starting to take hold. Remember those days?
Dimly.
And yeah, and I said, if you were truly woke, if you were truly awake, you would understand what it is we are trying to talk about in the men's rights movement.
Yep. Yeah.
And
and it isn't it never has been exploiting or controlling women.
no.
Like in the core of the men's movement that I'm familiar with and I support, we are more than just against that idea. We are not interested in it.
No.
Yeah.
It's like we have to push ourselves to even bring up the subject because we don't think that way. We don't think about exploiting or controlling or oppressing women or anybody else. And the danger is that the people that are more than happy to exploit and take advantage of and oppress and control women, they get all the clicks and all the views, and we have to clean up a mess saying that ain't us, but I think
how many
people
videos
are
have I done on this subject?
right?
You
The
should
people
go
are
through my TikTok.
Regular people are starting to wake up to that. But like anything else, just like, Dead Duck, what you had to go through, and Michelle, what you had to go through, and certainly what I had to go through, is the pain of realization. It's never comfortable, and it's never easy to talk about, and it's never easy, to admit to oneself, I have been fooled. I have been made a fool of. And to be able to say that out loud. Now, it's a whole lot easier if you can do it in a little group of people who can also say, yeah, I was lied to also. They screwed me just as hard as they screwed you. But, you know, once that's over with, then we owe it to each other to always be honest and to always be, I guess, patient, because normal people, they're having to go through that pain without, you know,
Support
without
network.
feeling, yeah, I mean, it's without feeling like it's life or death.
Mm.
I mean, for people that have really, really been through it, you feel like, yeah, I really don't want to look at this and I really don't want to wake up this way, but I don't have a choice because if I don't, I'm going to die.
Mm.
And regular people just, going through their life, they don't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
We're coming to them and saying, you know, be as humble and honest and brave as we have been, even though you don't really have a reason to, just because, you know. But nowadays, it's a little bit easier because everybody's starting to feel the pinch.
Yeah.
It's easier to say to somebody, you better wake up because, they're having a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
But before they were just having a happy little dream, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And how we've spoken about being, what does it mean to be red pilled?
Mm-hmm.
Or being red pilled is you are aware. And unfortunately, when you start to become aware, you start to get angry because you realize everything that you thought beforehand was complete and utter bullshit.
Yep.
And the number of guys that I see going through red pill rage, or when they hear what I would call the legitimate red pill, it just makes them angry.
It
They
does.
don't like it.
Yeah. Angry,
And
resentful,
Yeah.
bitter. That's why I, couldn't associate with the men going their own way because they don't go, you know.
yeah,
They stay where they are and they spin their wheels and they just soak in their bitterness and resentment. And I'm like, I'm I'm an alcoholic. Those are the things that kill me the quickest,
mm,
right? I mean, I could do it. I could be bitter and resentful and hostile, but not for very long.
yeah.
I'd be drunk in a day and I'd be dead in a week. you know, but like I said, we're
I
we're talking about, uh, I guess, appealing to and incentivizing people that just haven't experienced the kind of things that we've experienced.
mm,
And I try to have a little compassion and empathy for them because I know for a fact that the first thing they have to get over, is their own, I guess, comfort. They
yeah,
literally have to put aside, you know, the things that are most important to them long enough to do something about this.
yeah,
And the only reason, like the three of us didn't have to do that is because those important things were ripped away from us. They're
yeah,
gone now and they're not coming back,
mm,
you know? And so we've got all the reason in the world to wake up as
yeah,
as miserable as it can be. We have to do it, right? They don't, you know.
yeah,
So, well, I should say they haven't had a reason to. That reason is starting to creep up on them. The regular people are starting to become very uncomfortable with the condition of men and boys. I
mm,
mean, all the way up to Forbes magazine and uh, the current U.S. Political scene. But that's unprecedented. You didn't see stuff like that up until here just recently.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
people don't like it. You know,
we haven't seen it globally, have we? I mean,
no,
let's be
no.
brutally honest. I mean, I know Michelle, you've brought up Boko Haram several times in your lives and what have you. I think stuff like that was a bit of a wake up call. The Johnny Depp case was a little bit of a wake up call. You know, I asked you the question the other night, didn't I, Michelle, when we were talking about male suicide and the fact that it's creeping up ever more and inevitably in the US. And I asked the question, how many men, how many bodies is enough for this world to wake the fuck up and see what's really going on out there? And just how dire the situation actually now is.
Right. Well, and I think the real answer to that is maybe too many. You know, Dead Duck, you and I have talked before about the tipping point. You know, the point at which nobody can do anything about it anymore, and it's all just going to come down, right? You know, and I believe firmly that such a tipping point exists. You know, and I think in a lot of respects we're already there, right? But pointing it out and making it clear, it's easy here among the three of us because we've been through it. We already know what it's like. You know, but for regular people that are just trying to get from one end of the day to the other and hold on to what they believe is, you know, the most important thing, means they can't hold on to all that and still be able to look over here and see what's really going on. They have to remain deluded, you know. But now, you know, at this point, that delusion is beginning to crumble, you know, even in spite of people like us as much as because of. You know?
And I told Mike he's asking the wrong, or Dead Duck. I've never ever had to call you that. Sorry.
That's all right.
I said you're asking the wrong question. It's not how many. There's never going to be a number. It's what do we get to get people to care? So whether the number is 20 or it's 120, until people care, right? That's the question. And this is all wrapped up in how do we get people to care about men and boys when men and boys, their worth is earned. It's in what they can produce. It's what they can, or their worth is based on women.
Yep.
I don't know how many of these fake men's help groups or whatever, and they're like, we'll help you with your mental health, and the way to be a better man is treat women better. And I was like, this is crazy. You are literally saying the way to make men better is to make them treat women better. You're out your dang mind. But that's the thought process. The happier the women are and the better a man treats a woman, his worth goes up. But what that just means is you're placating women and you're making their life better.
Right.
And
at your own expense.
At your own expense, exactly. So we have to separate and this is going to be for them as well. And me and Dead Duck were talking with this one guy, and I mean, he was convinced his worth was his relation to I mean, it was his daughter. But I mean, that was his only worth. That was his purpose. That was his worth. Nothing else. I mean, we asked him hobbies. We asked him, you know, like, what do you even like to eat? I mean, nothing. That was his worth. And he says, if that goes, I have nothing. I am nothing. And
I used the analogy, didn't I, of the oxygen mask on an airplane. And when you go to fly, it does say in the safety briefing, in the event of the masks dropping, you have to put your mask on first before anyone else.
So we have to teach men and boys or to start teaching boys too. You don't have to earn your worth. You are worthy because you are a human being. And then we hear the difference in the language of feminists and MRAs. Women saying that they deserve this. We deserve this. We deserve this. Men saying we need to earn this. We need to earn this. No, you shouldn't earn the right to your children. You shouldn't have to earn the right to mental health help. You shouldn't earn the right to be called a victim. And these are not things that should be earned.
It's unwise and unsustainable to constantly force men and boys to earn regard, and inclusion, while at the same time never requiring that women and girls do the same thing. Earlier this week, I was watching a podcast. I don't know if either of you are familiar with Chris Williamson, Dead Duck. He's a fellow Brit, and he does pretty good. But he was talking to a journalist and researcher by the name of Freya India, and her concern is the well-being of women and girls. And she was talking about this very recent and very underreported 138% spike in suicides among girls ages 12 to 24. Right? And, she kind of mapped it out, forensically, and the common thread was the influence of social media. Now, in the course of the discussion, there was actually a little bit of discussion about, the positive influence and preventative influence of, good male presence in the lives of these girls.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting there, but I mean, it wasn't really, brought home, right? And I was sitting there thinking, the one thing about these successful suicides is that, those girls and women, they're never going to complain about, how their life was again, because they're going to be dead for a really long time, right? So, and, it brings me back to things like male suicide and male untimely death, and I said, the best thing about all these guys, that either killed themselves or, met with an untimely death is they'll never complain about anything again. Their problems are now over now and from now on, right? At least their earthly problems. And I'm like, that's not a very efficient way to run a society, is just wait for people to kill themselves if they're not happy. But at the same time, then you have the pressure and the I guess, effort of doing something about it so that you prevent more of that, right? And of course, in that discussion, they were like, well, should we just ban social media? It's like, good luck with that, or should we restrict, whatever. In other words, some like half-assed top-down ham-fisted solution that never works. And, it's like, no, you don't do that. Don't be stupid again, right? Be intelligent for once, and look at how those girls got there. They really didn't, their suicide did not arise in a vacuum. It didn't. It happened either because of something in their life that shouldn't be there, or something that needed to be in their life that wasn't, or both. And this is just a classic case of both. Now, Mike, you got a daughter.
Yep.
And you and I have talked about how your talk, how your influence on her is different than most fathers of daughters that I've run into really my whole life. That you you do have a discussion with your daughter about, how to take care of herself and hold herself up, in her relationships with boys and with men. But unlike most fathers of daughters, you also have that other conversation that most parents have with their sons about, you know, how you expect your daughter to treat men and boys in your life, and
Okay.
that failing, being able to treat men and boys like human beings and, like having a value. If you don't do that, you'll be sorry,
Mm.
you know. And like I said, I could just think about the influence of social media on all these girls, that are dead now. I'm like, that's why, you know, they nobody ever said a word about it, you know.
Mm.
And so they
I,
feel like the 50% of the population that they're around is alien and other and potentially hostile.
I'm going to introduce you guys. You'll both be obviously aware of Reddit,
Mm-hmm.
I would hope.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if this comes up, I will. I'm on a subreddit called Am I Ugly? Now, my reasons for going on there were years ago, okay, when I was going through all the hair raising shit I went through. I went on there and I posted a picture and said, Am I ugly? And somebody come back to me and said, Yes, but that's not your problem. Your problem is you're broken. Now, this was just a normal selfie. You couldn't have known what was going on in the background. It was just an ordinary selfie.
Yeah.
And he said, You just look fucking broken. And at the time I was, you know. Um, but the number of really, not really young, but 18 to 21-year-old girls I see come up on that subreddit, I can't get it to load, um, who say, am I ugly? And generally speaking, they're not. They're conventionally pretty. And even if they are, what does it matter? I've I've tried going on there and saying, look, being attractive is only going to get you so far in life. You'll only ever be, you know, the girl who posts semi-naked pictures of herself or things like that. And if all your value is placed in how you look, when your looks eventually go, which they will, what have you got left? Nothing. Start building some value in your life. Be better than that. You've got so much potential going forward. Build some positive character traits in yourself for the betterment of society, for crying out. And those comments just get deleted.
Mhm.
Or I get private messages. That's not what the person was asking. They wanted to know if they were attractive. I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Being physically attractive, and that subreddit just breaks my heart. It really does. And some of them, I say it's a majority of girls. It may be a couple of guys come along once in a blue moon, but and some of them are just fishing. I would
Mm,
say they know
sure.
they're attractive and they're just fishing for
Yeah.
compliments, or they got an
Potential.
only, yeah, or they've got an OnlyFans and they want to get subscribers
Right.
because
That's
they know.
it's
Mm,
part of just this really rickety, unsustainable,
mm,
in the moment, um, social order that does depend on how one looks, or, in the case of men, the 4 6s, if you know what I'm talking about.
yeah,
6 feet
Mm.
tall, six figures, six pack abs, and 6 inches of something. But
I might
point
be.
being that, the any and all of those are subject to, to being taken away, right? Or being somehow subverted, so
Mm,
that you're still just some other guy, right?
mm,
Or in the case of physical appearance, those things can fade or be taken away, or, be, the subject to the whims of fashion, et cetera, and so forth. So
mm-hmm,
that you were, hot one day and next day you're not. So you're right, it doesn't matter. But, I learned, I guess, you know, the process of getting around that from one of my caregivers who is staunchly feminist and made a YouTube and TikTok video basically discussing how she should be complimented in her work as a caregiver, right? And she said she's not offended by comments about her looks. She looks nice. I mean, she's really attractive, but her own. She's like, if you want to compliment me, talk about how well I do what I do, she's like, the only reason for that is because that's like the thing that, I'm not riding on my looks, right? Because, there were times in the past where, she had self-esteem issues around weight and stuff like that, that she managed to work through and all that. But he's like, I really love what I do. If you can't tell me that I'm doing well at what I do, then don't say anything. Right.
The
And I'm like,
problem is,
no.
right, and maybe you can pass this on to her. I don't know if she would be accepting of it. That's okay if it's you saying it. She's good at what she does. Or any other client. If they say, or any client's family, I'm hoping I never have to know how good she is at her job. Yeah? So
No, yeah, I get it.
What have I got? So if I wanted to pay her a compliment, okay, just in passing, really and truthfully, all I've got is what she looks like.
Well, here,
Yeah.
I got you, and I understand, and you represent the bulk, of people that may see her, right? But here's my thing, I've said this to you before, Mike. He's one of my cuddle therapists, okay, and I understand you not wanting, to be familiar with her work, but I contend and maintain that you should be. Okay. But just not for the same reasons as me. They're a multi-purpose outfit. But, to Michelle, to kind of bring you into the loop here, I have right now, let's see, anywhere from 3 to 5 mental health providers. And really only one of them is covered by my insurance, so the rest is out of pocket. But to make a long story short, they provide me physical touch therapy and also talk therapy to deal with, among other things, my trauma. But the thing is, like my one-on-one trauma therapist is a specialist. She is very good at what she does, and she's very good at handling men, in particular. The other professional therapist, or traditional therapist, is a group therapist. Same thing. She just happens to really be good at what she does. But both of them are rogue. They don't toe the line, right? They do what they have to do to treat their clients. But I also go to cuddle therapists. And again, same thing, only the best of the best, right? Is anything less than that, and I'm just, I'm nitroglycerin. Not only will it not work, but I'll blow up the whole building. So it's got to be just a certain kind of thing. So I understand her saying, I put a lot into this. This is my, my whole world. But it's not just for people with really bad, like trauma or anxiety or depression. It's also for people that are, just, untrained, but desirous of learning about all of the ins and outs of physically interacting with other people in an intimate but non-sexual way.
Yeah.
And like I said, right now, drastic times call for drastic measures.
Yeah.
And I freely admit this is a drastic measure. Okay. This is way the hell outside the line.
Yeah.
However, I contend and I maintain that we have now put ourselves in a place where doing some really unusual and remarkable stuff is the only option left on the table because we've tried everything else and it failed.
Yeah.
I wish that wasn't true. I mean, I could have gone the rest of my life without ever knowing any of these people, as long as everything, when I look outside, everything is not on fire. But it is,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, I'm not going to keep doing, all this stuff that doesn't work. I mean, I've put a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of emotional pain into trying to do it their way. And like I said, not only did it fail, but I caused a lot of people a lot of misery, and I almost took myself out of the game. So I'm like, I'm not going to do that anymore, but I got to do something. So I'm going to do this. And I promise you, if it ever doesn't work, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I just have, this whole feminist thing of don't compliment me on my looks, compliment me on my work or what have you. It's like, well, if I don't know your work, how can I compliment you on it?
That's the thing is the, it's an implied, and I like, go at them about this. You're implying that, that whoever you're, like wagging your finger at, don't talk about my looks. You're implying that that person is already familiar with who you are, as a professional, as a person, as a human, that they know what you're like already, and they don't, I didn't know what she was like, and her predecessor before she retired, I make a long story short, Michelle, I was in trauma therapy for probably already a year and a half, 2 years, and I re-traumatized myself by having this really bad triggering episode of skin hunger, just lack of touch. And so, unfortunately, my solution to that was to go visit a massage parlor. It was a terrible idea. Now, the young lady that was my masseuse did nothing wrong. She's a very nice young lady who was just doing her job. And, there was nothing she did that, was intrusive or anything like that. She was just doing her work. I walked out of there a mess. And most important, or just as importantly, I walked out of there $400 poorer. And to be delicate about it, my stuff didn't work. If you get my drift, I didn't finish, right? So I was entirely miserable, and I had to go back and talk about it to my poor, unfortunate therapist. And she said, I got just this thing. You don't need a massage parlor. You need, some kind of intimate touch that is bi-directional, that goes both ways, where you can touch and be touched, but not in a sexual way. So she referred me to Cuddlist.com, and I made an appointment. But I went in there, freshly rattled up and screwed up. I went to this woman's home, total stranger, right? Just did a phone interview, and I put myself in her hands, But the point I'm trying to make with you is, if I wasn't under a lot of duress, right? If I wasn't under some real pressure, I wouldn't have done it. some
Yeah.
random lady is going to paw at me for, an hour, and that's supposed to make me feel better? You kidding?
Hmm.
I'm a
Yeah.
trauma survivor. I don't do any of that very well. But it worked out perfectly,
Yeah.
because that's when I went there, that's not what happened. I was handled properly. Right.
Hmm.
But, for the people who aren't in my condition, don't have that, malady, um, the rest of it is just about learning how to get involved enough with other people that you can talk about their work, or you can talk
Yeah.
about, their passion, without
Hmm.
worrying about, whether or not their eyeliner is on point today. Because
No,
it's like
it's
I can hold on to that. I'm a regular guy. I'm a red-blooded heterosexual male, and I can, like, Michelle, I'm looking at you, and you look great. You're very attractive, right? Welcome. But the point is, I'm moved more and attracted more, and I guess connected more by what you do and how you do it and why you do it than, you know, the condition of your eyelashes, right?
Well, this is the lie that feminists teach girls, right? And I can say it from a very early age. You're going to be judged more harshly by your looks, on your looks, by women than you ever will by men.
Yeah.
However, there comes a point where I remember I did a live, and I put it on the background. I said, women judge women more harsher than men. Oh, no, that's not true. Men judge me on my looks all the time. Men tell me how ugly I am. Men tell me this, men tell me that. And I said, well, hold on. And then they started talking about the fashion industry and all this stuff. I said, I want you to really think back. Just don't jump to the answer. But who is the first person that made you feel bad about your body? Who was the first person that made you feel bad about your look? And then it got really quiet, and then it was like my mother, my grandmother.
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, when you go out with your girlfriend, do you put up all your makeup on? Do you put on all your face? You do that, or do you just go out in your jams? Oh, I got to put on makeup. Why? There's no men there. Why are you doing that?
Yeah. The
Because
other
they
women
judge.
are there.
Well, yeah, and they did a study of um, would a woman rather go into a boardroom with five other women or five other men? And all the women picked, well, most of the women picked the men because they
Yeah.
said those women are going to judge me. And it's
Yeah.
true. Women
Yeah.
judge women, but they've, like the editor in chief of Vogue, editor in chief of Marie Claire, these are all women. They're pushing this stuff. They want you to feel bad about yourself.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the line, the feminists convinced, oh, well, it's men who care. It's men who care. But it's always been men who have told me, you look beautiful without your makeup. I'm really, Mike knows, I'm like so self-conscious about my eye because like this is all reconstructive surgery. I mean, they did a great job.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, and I have like a little lisp. And he's like, no one would notice. But to
mm,
me, it's like glaring. Like that's all I can see. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But men have been always the ones that have said you're fine. Like you don't. Why? They always go. You do these videos, and we think you're doing like a fashion shoot. Is that how you walk around? I'm like, yep, pretty much. And it's not because men, but the conditioned answer is why who makes you feel bad about your looks? It's men. And this is the problem.
mhm.
Feminism,
Mm-hmm.
I I was kind of thinking about this today, like because I'm working on a video about like how the Me Too movement really hurt men. And it shouldn't have been called the Me Too movement. It should have been called the Me movement because that's what feminism is. it takes power away from women. And it's not an empowering movement. It's
No.
we lacked this, we didn't have this, we never had power here. It's all lies. It's all lies. You go back anthropologically, women held like humongous power. And even in the United States, women held humongous power, but we don't learn about those women, because if we learned about those women, then we would have to admit, oh crap, we did have power. We weren't as oppressed as we thought we were. And then the idea of the patriarchy just falls apart, right?
Really?
They have
Yeah.
feminism is the greatest lie that's been ever told to women, because men will always be blamed for everything. And as long as they can blame men, that means they don't have to fix what's in here.
Mm.
And I believe the red pill people have the same problem as the extreme feminists. They have been hurt by a person or persons of a certain gender, and then they blame all that gender. And it's easier to do that
Sure.
is to go, okay, I've got to see a therapist every week. I have to maintain this. I have to do this. I have to do this. It's hard, man. There's some weeks where I'm like, I don't want to see my caseworker. There are got I just want to sleep. I'm tired. Like I don't even know how I could work, because I have like you, I've got like four. I don't have a cuddle therapist. I don't think they have them around here, but I don't know. Um, but like I have four people that like keep me going. Like that's their job, to make sure
Right.
that I run, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not a normal thing to go from like attempted murder to, jumping off buildings. Apparently they told me that's not a normal thing, that I'm abnormal in some way. Um, um, and they said it's not normal that you're out there like, you know, marching and, for the opposite sex that did this to you. But I guess my point is, I want my story to be used as, if I can get through this and not hate men and champion for men's rights. I mean, not that my trauma was the worst thing that could have ever happened in the world. I realize that there's worse. I don't want the Olympic blue ribbon for worse. But, actually dying is pretty
Yeah.
bad. Like,
Yeah.
that's that's high on the list, I would think. Um, and if I can come back from it, certainly, you know, but it's work, and they want to blame men. So my whole point is, I'm trying to tell them in a very not aggressive way, because I think that's the other problem. We have, and Mike knows this, there are guys on on TikTok that'll just scream at these women. Oh my God, no, we have it worse, and we have it worse, and we have it worse. You have to explain to them why feminism is bad. And if you say what you really think this movement is empowering isn't, you don't know famous women. This one feminist, she couldn't name one female inventor. And
There
it's
are a
because the
few, in
schools,
fairness, but not very
Yeah.
many.
Mm.
I
And
mean,
like hearing how you interact, with the women half of the public, like Dead Duck, you were asking, uh, what else if you don't know a woman, but you have seen her, what is there to compliment her on other than her looks? And my contention is that because of the pressure that Michelle and pretty much every other woman and girl you've ever met the pressure that they get put under about their looks from other women.
Mm.
Okay, it's not men constantly, or not always men constantly only looking at their looks. It's kind of everybody, mostly women.
Mm.
And so in for the purpose of, I guess, cheering on the kind of women that I have a lot of respect for, I will talk about what they do,
Mm.
and I won't say very much about how they look, right? And I won't, I don't know, if it's somebody I've known for a while, right? I won't compare, uh, like how they looked at one point in the past and how they look now,
Yeah.
right? Because for one thing, at that point, it's kind of meaningless to me.
Mm.
I could say it, but I don't really care,
Yeah.
But if I
I.
can talk about what they do,
Mm.
then I feel like this is just for my own sake, right? I feel like I have let them know that I really do appreciate them individually,
Mm.
as an individual person, not as a member of a group compared to each other.
Yeah.
And
The thing
I'm
is,
trying to get women to compliment themselves, to not need a man's anything.
yeah.
Right.
The
Like,
thing is, I.
And that's the outcome. This person I'm talking about, um, partially because of her interactions with me, you know, she is good and confident and clear about, you know, uh, her own worth, right?
Mm.
And I mean, I'm just a client, I mean, I'm just uh, the subject matter, but because I try to approach it that way, I make that contribution to her life, right? And the what ends up happening is when I talk, she believes me. You
Mm.
know, when I talk to her about something that really bugs me, that she has no experience with, or that she's heard a lot of counter conditioning to from things like feminism and the media, et cetera, she still believes me, right?
Mm.
Not CNN, not The View, right? Not Kamala Harris. She believes me, right? And it's only because I took the time and the effort to say, I do appreciate how you look. You look great, whatever. But the reason I care about you and the reason why, I uh, stay connected with you is because of what you do.
Yeah. See,
And
I don't.
Michelle, that was one reason I was so happy to hear you were going to be joining us today, just because of the fact that you are one of the ones who are able to do what you do, right? Do you know? I'll ask you, like I ask all the rest of them. Do you know how rare that makes you? It's like profoundly rare.
We're in
You know?
unicorn territory here.
Yeah. I mean,
I think.
there are. You might not know this, but I've seen a lot of your work and how you do what you do, and I'm like, I might look around for 1,000 years, never find anybody again that does what you do the way you do it. And it means something as much because of what happened to you as because, it, like I say, it's effective. You do it even though you don't have to. And this person that is my caregiver, she does what she does, and she doesn't have to, right? There's nobody holding a gun to your head or hers saying, you have to listen to this man, right? This kind of plain looking and broken down, uh, lonely man, who has his little story to tell, right? And it's like, the ripple effect behind that is a lot bigger than you might be able to see right now. What I get when I watch you on TikTok, or now when I'm talking to you, I don't drop it and leave it behind when we're done talking or when I'm done watching you. Take it with me. And I don't just do that for, to strengthen myself. I take it with me to strengthen the next person. I say this, I point to you and others like you and say, here is proof that it can be done. And despair is not the answer. And that, hope is it's kind of a, curious and delicate thing. It has to be handled properly. And if you put your hope, I tell a man, if you put your hope in, uh, uh, the red pill, the hustle, it will hurt you. It will tear you up, and you will cause damage on your way down. If if it's a woman and they're putting all their chips behind radical feminism, all I say is your hope there will hurt you eventually. Maybe not now or tomorrow or next week, but it will come back, and you will be sorry. And by that time coming, it'll be too late to do anything about it. Stop now, and turn around and come back. Because if you don't, there will come a day when the only thing you'll be able to hold on to is that this crazy old man told you were going to be sorry, and sure as shit you are. Like
I would
inevitable.
I would make the argument holding on to feminism will do that, not just radical.
Oh, I know. I know.
From what I've
The only kind of feminism that I have any faith in anymore is the kind that has people in it that are not happy with it. I mean, even the intersectionalists who are, huh?
And I mean, it's like that old joke, like the only, good lawyers are the ones on the bottom of the sea. The only good feminism is the kind that isn't around anymore.
Yeah, the kind that, is generating a lot of dissatisfaction in the rank and file. I'm very happy to see that, because that means that those people are going through that painful process of waking up. My friend, who's just a friend, had a recent bout with that, because where she works, she was at a luncheon with her coworkers, almost all of whom were women, and one of them piped up to start bad mouthing her husband, and saying what hey, you're no good, worthless, and just immediately expanded that to all men. And my friend, who has been my friend for a while, she was very offended by that. How could you say that about men? That's just being, that's just being a bigot, right? I'm like, yeah, it kind of is. And she was like, well, what do you think I should do? I said, well, you can kind of do whatever you want. I mean, it was a work function, and attendance was mandatory and all that. And like, you could go complain to HR, but don't expect no miracles. You know what I mean? It's like, because they're not going to want to do very much about something like that. And she's like, well, how can you be, to me, how can you be so like tolerant and like okay with it? I'm like, this is the water I swim in. I mean, this is a little snapshot of my life and the life of most men, and like I said, that's a very painful awakening, but at the same time, I mean, it quiets the feminist voice in her mind, and it amplifies ours. And that way, I make a change in at least one person without firing a shot.
Yeah.
No hostility, lots of patience and empathy and compassion, and that part of her worldview is beaten all by itself.
Mm.
It beat itself up and just collapsed. And I'm like, I didn't have to say nothing, right? And I'm like, I like that. That's the kind of change I want to make.
Mm.
I was telling Keely, my cuddle therapist, so by nature I'm a manipulator, right? I'm kind of Machiavellian. I'm not very good at it, but that's my go-to, right? I don't gaslight, but you know, I'm I have a tendency to leave certain things out if I'm not careful. You see what I mean?
Mm.
So the way that I kind of overcome that is just be honest about it. Like if you hear me saying something that seems a little off, it probably is. But otherwise, if I don't do that, then I just kind of be manipulative, right? So, but me saying that doesn't just like protect them from me, right? It also protects me kind of from myself, and that's how I can have that kind of conversation with that kind of person. Like even some of the, I mean, most of the people on your lives, Michelle, and on your, that make comments in your comment section, they're out of reach. There would be nothing I could say to them. They're doomed, right? They're just going to have to go through what they're going to have to go through. But there are a few, you know, that if I was that open and honest with them, and if I exercise some humility about it, I have made progress with those kind of people, where they're not quite so knee jerk about how they see us. It ain't easy, I mean, it takes work, and
Mm.
the only thing I lean back on is being patient.
Poor Mike, I always bring him in. I'm like, I need you. Feminists are coming at me. Kind of like my un unofficial. I'm like, come on, Mike, you gotta come in. You gotta come in
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's the lack of, you know, I decided I was going to kind of change things up with how I was doing things because I was seeing that it wasn't working. That and I saw just the real problems. And I think like that's the thing with feminism. People just follow it blindly. And if you follow any movement blindly, you're not going to do well. You got to point out what's not only working right, but what's working wrong.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, what? Why isn't this going where it should be going? Like we should be further along than this. And then I would see guys' videos that claim that they're MRAs, but they would all revolve around women. It would be a 23-year-old woman talking. She would say something, they'd make a snarky response, and that was their video.
Mm.
And I mean, literally, Mike knows like there's like 6 creators that I can't even tell apart. Like, I can't even
Mm.
tell them apart because they make the same damn videos. And
Yeah.
then you have the guys that go into feminist lives just on purpose to fight them because they think it's fun and they antagonize them. And I'm like, you're not doing yourself any favors. You're making us look like assholes. Like everything they think about a man, you just confirmed in their mind instead of
Mhm.
changing them. And
Yep.
then, um, and then we have the guys that run lives that just do controversial topics for controversial sake. So they
Mm.
pit a topic of a man against a woman. So, like never date a single mother. Men are better at this or like that. and none of it's men centered. It's
No.
still female centered. At the end
Yeah.
of the day, it all revolves around women. So I'm thinking, what the fuck is this? So
Exactly.
so when I do a topic or something, I first of all figure out how to make. Now, I could easily do a controversial live and get 100 people in there. Are they going to be the 100 people I want? No,
No.
they're not going to probably be the 100 people I want.
No.
So I always try to make it not divisive, but enough where it can spark a discussion. But then also with my videos, the only time it's around a mom or a woman is if it's educating on something. So it's not a snarky 23-year-old, woman who just is saying something because she wanted to go viral. It's
Yeah.
either commenting on, like, I'm doing a series on boy moms right now, which those women are batshit crazy. Um, they're batshit. But I'm not saying, hey, you ladies are batshit. Um, I'm explaining this is how you don't raise a son. This
Right.
is what you could do to your child. This is what the effects are. But
Yeah.
most of the time I try to do like a 95 to 5% ratio. I try to center men 95% of the time. And I find the problem is other creators are centering women 90.
95% of the time. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I often think
So,
that Dead Duck and I, because I I know that you put out that kind of education, and there's one or two others that touch on it occasionally. The boy mom, uh, I don't know what you would call it, problem. But like Dead Duck and I could probably uh, have a whole podcast about the girl dad problem because it's much more prevalent and
Mm-hmm.
it's much more widespread. The I don't know how you'd even put it. The mishandling and neglect of daughters by their fathers because those fathers, basically uh, coddle and protect and like over shelter their daughters to the point where they can't manage anything once they become adults,
Mm.
right? They're just completely bereft. They have no idea how to navigate in a world with men in it because I say the only man in her life has been dad, and dad has basically given her princess treatment from birth to well into her 20s.
but
And
my question
you
is
know
that like a phenomenon with single fathers? Because I know single fathers don't do that. Like, is that more like a couple thing?
yeah, yeah,
It it's
more
a
often.
Yeah, more often it is. It's just a dad to a daughter thing. It really
Right.
is.
And
I'm a
like Dead Duck, your solution probably isn't easy, but it is very simple. I mean, just like all those other fathers, he's protective of and concerned about and uh, um, regarding his daughter's future, but it isn't only one half of the preparation.
mm,
That like 99 out of 100 fathers will prepare their daughters, to basically not even go on dates, right?
yeah.
And not have to do with young men.
Well, that's the
But
problem. How can you say that? And this is the problem we had with bear versus man thing.
uh,
How can you say, well, if you date I'm gonna bury him, or like, because all men want one thing. Well,
Right.
you're basically putting down your own gender, aren't you? You're confirming her fears,
Right.
and like, the world loves to make women afraid of men.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I remember, so growing up, that was like you fear men more than you fear anything else in this world. And
Hmm.
then if you read J.C. Dugard's memoir, she was kidnapped for 23 years.
Hmm.
And the only reason she stopped, she was on her bike on her way to school, way home. The only reason she stopped because it was a woman, and her mom said women are safe. You never have
Yeah.
to worry about a woman.
Yeah.
Well,
That
um,
turned out to be wrong.
we have to, yeah. I mean, we have to reteach. I mean, and I haven't tackled girl dads yet because these boy moms are just nuttier than fruitcakes. I don't even know how I'm gonna get through all of it. Like, the one I'm dealing with now is she's like, every time I look at my son, I will know that I was his first kiss. And I was like, oh my God. Like, that is disgusting.
Did you
Like,
say
there's something wrong with you ladies. And it wasn't just one.
I
did you
know.
say
I know.
Sigmund Freud and
Well,
Oedipus complex?
yeah.
Calling Sigmund Freud,
But
um,
here
Oedipus.
in uh I hate to try to defend this, but these are people who these are women, mothers, you know, that like they start to feel like this is the right thing to do and the best that they can do. There's a reason for that, you know. Um
Because they
and
weren't raised right by their dads.
Exactly. They weren't raised knowing what to expect, and
Mm.
now they have a whole human being they're responsible for that's not the same sex or gender as they are. And it's like, well, I guess I should, like do all this really sketchy, oh my God type stuff, which will make him comfortable with women. And it's like, no, it won't. No, it won't,
And
No,
I
but
also think that feminism teaches women that they don't. Warren Farrell talks about this in The Boy Crisis, about how the government put out a bunch of commercials, like when they were really pushing welfare in the 80s.
mhm,
And they asked a bunch of women, do you think you need a man to, raise your child? No, I don't need a man. I don't need a man. I don't need a man.
mhm,
And one of the most controversial question or statements that I make is, single woman can't raise a man. You can raise a boy, but you can't raise a man.
not
Um,
very easily and not very well.
no,
They just kind of wait till they get to a certain age and expel them, and it's like that's not good enough, but the I like I understand how they get there because the supposedly traditional example of a father raising a daughter, is the father that is sitting there in the living room polishing his shotgun when his daughter's date shows up,
mm,
you know. And it's like this is how you have to be. And it's like if you be like that, right, then you're going to get what you're going to get,
it's funny
They
actually because I did this with my brother-in-law when it came to my sister,
Mhm.
um, which we now joke about. Bearing
Yeah.
in mind this was what 10 plus years ago now. My nan was still, well, I put it this way, my nan was still alive,
Mhm.
and I've been driving heavy goods vehicles for 10 years. So that tells you how long ago that was.
Mhm.
Um, because her passing away was what paid for my license. Um, so yeah, and I did it back then. I didn't really, I guess, know any different. But then my brother-in-law is a complete wet lettuce of a guy. So, he needs he needed toughening up a bit, I think. And now he's got his legs under him. He's a lot better with me, so
Mhm.
he's not scared of his big brother-in-law. I don't think I'm going to have any of these problems with my daughter. Um, I've spoken to you before, Taz, about where I think she's going in that regard. So I
Yep.
don't think I'm going to have any of these kinds of problems.
Right.
My son, he's not interested in that kind of thing at the minute. I have tried to explain this stuff to him, that everything for his consent matters, and he shouldn't be afraid to tell a girl no
Yeah.
when it comes down to it. So there we are. Anyway, it is 20 to 11 in the evening,
Yeah.
my time. And I've got a really, really good book tattooed on the inside of my eyelids, which I'd like to go and read
All right.
for a few hours. So
All right. Well, does anybody have any final thoughts? I think I'm pretty much played out,
I
but
I think I'm gonna just say thank you to Michelle for joining us this evening. It's been a pleasure, and horrifying the full details of everything else that happened. I'd heard sort of the cliff notes obviously from you, but to know the full extent of that night was pretty horrific. Um, and I think Taz and we can agree that we're glad to have you on our side.
yeah,
And just
really,
please don't stop doing what you're doing.
please.
We've had that, yeah, we've
I
had
will.
that conversation before, haven't we, Michelle? So
Yeah, it's just, there's some days where it's, it's harder than others and you don't think you're doing enough and I mean, I think it's hard too because like my body, especially right now, it's not cooperating. So I think when I'm hoping, um, I started the titration treatments and stuff like that. So I'm hoping by next month, um, I'll be actually able to get out there and like advocate like how I used to, because that's what kind of brought me a little bit more pep in my step. It's been kind of hard being like bedridden in my head, you know.
Mhm.
So, and then I can do more, uh, like hopefully public speaking engagements, which is really where I want to go and get in front of people and um, kind of do it that way. And my heart's set on a march, and I, that's the dream. And but yeah, I just and the anniversary's coming up soon, so that's gonna be a hard day. Um, as it always is. It's a weird day. Um, but I just think that my last thoughts are, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think I wouldn't be doing anything that was going to hurt my own gender, um, or the women that are affected by DV. But like I said, I volunteered with them for quite some time, and they they got their. I mean, I don't like how they do it, but they've got enough voices speaking up for them, and there's just none on this side.
Amen. Amen.
amen to that as well.
I'll say it again, Michelle. Thank you so much for being here and
You're
telling your
welcome.
story and being, uh, brave in the face of insurmountable odds. Um, and like I said before, uh, your your value is just because you exist, and because you're a whole human being. And like I said before, you know, if anybody asks, I'll tell them, yeah, Michelle, she looks great. You know, very attractive and mature and classy looking woman. The thing that makes her rare and precious and irreplaceable is what she does and how she does it and why she does it. You know, and on that, just do whatever it is you have to do and ask whatever it is you have to ask so you can keep doing it. Because there aren't nearly enough of you, and what you do, you know, what you do goes places where Dead Duck and I just can't go, can't, and that's okay. You know, as long as you're doing it, that's what matters. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right, I guess that's it. I gotta go eat and take care of myself, and then try to get a little more sleep before I work tonight. Ugh.
Oh,
But
good luck
thank you
with that.
both. Thank you. Thank you both so much for being here. And thanks everybody for listening. And we will see you all again next time.